Welcome back to Witch Church. It's Mal, and I'm super excited to have my friend Sarah Melin on for the big three of December 2025. Sarah is my astrologer friend located in Gothenburg, Sweden. And we met earlier this year at a astrology conference in Stockholm. So I'm glad we're finally reuniting, Sarah. And I'm glad that you're here with me to unpack the end of 2025. It's been quite an epic year and looks like this month will be quite busy. So, thank you for being here to help me unpack everything.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And I would love for you to give us a little bit more about maybe just your journey to becoming a professional astrologer. I know you primarily practice Hellenistic like I do. But I want to know what was your journey like? What was the spiritual awakening moments? Give us all the tea on that.
Okay. Well, I'm working in theater. I'm a dramaturg and a theater historian, a theater historian. That's my background. So I've always been really interested in myth and in storytelling and also in presenting stories to an audience. And astrology has also always been a huge interest of mine. I think definitely since I was a child, I have this thing of always remembering friends' birthdays and keeping track on um, the cycle of the year and also pointing out or placing out all everyone's birthday. But I guess it was 2018 when things changed for me a little bit at work, and I think I was going through a transit for sure. I haven't actually backdated, how it started, but I was definitely going towards my midlife transits when I saw my chart, and also I was practicing tarot. So it was through tarot that I got more and more inspired and fascinated by astrology. And then came the pandemic 2020, and I took a course for Kira Tauburn. She also had a podcast. I took a course with her, and she also had this great program that she called the 11th house. So parallel to the program, the course, the fundamental course in Hellenistic astrology, I also had peer students. So there were so many friends who I met there, but also the opportunity to practice what I was learning parallel made a huge impact on my astrology studies. Since then, I've studied for other teachers. One of my great teachers is Jason Holly, working with experiment. No, I lost the word. Uh, Not experimental. He works with astrodrama, basically, and also experience-based astrology. So for me, that practice of blending theater work, blending, being in an embodied environment with the celestial bodies, and also the myth that keeps playing out in our lives, and the help that we can have through astrology of mapping out and also experience and exploring those myths. That's my path, and that's how also I meet clients. And I actually combine these two practices. So I still work with theater, and I work with astrology, and I find ways combine them. And I also see myself when I work as an astrologer that I'm kind of a dramaturg. So I help um, to navigate and to define the stories with my clients. And it's also how I teach astrology actually. um, I see Mercury as a dramaturg, and I see the astrologer as a dramaturg, and that's how I venture into the astrological language. um,
That makes so much sense to me. Even as a Hellenistic astrologer, you're always trying to think about what does this planet do in this sign or like this costume. If Mars loves being in the costume of Aries, but is uncomfortable in the costume of Libra, like what does that look like? And like, how does Mars behave when he's in this uncomfortable costume? Like, I love thinking about especially the essential dignities in terms of theater. So I think that's awesome.
It's also such a great model to invite people who are very new to astrology. So I start my readings with setting up the stage, presenting the four cornerstones of astrology: the planets, the signs, the houses, and the aspects. And I map them out as being a part of a play, with the signs being scenography and so on. And I find that that's such a great way to start the play that we actually do together as an astrologer and a client, because I that's also something that I really enjoy. For instance, in the way that Jason teaches, like seeing the meeting as a fluid playground between us as astrologers and clients, or even students. It's
Totally.
mm.
I love it. And Sarah, well, first, what is your big three? And then will you also tell us your favorite part of your chart?
Mm. I have a Pisces sun and a Capricorn moon, and I'm a Libra rising. And I guess, or I know that my favorite part of my chart is definitely my Venus, that I also have in Pisces, uh, because nearly, I mean, very many of my planets are in either in signs where they are um, oh, now I lose my English.
That's okay.
Where they are not in dignity, basically. So my Piscean Venus is one of my planets that is in dignity, and she's doing very well in my sixth house in Pisces.
Totally, totally. It's so funny
Mm,
you say that because I have I feel like I attract a lot of Libra risings into my life. I contribute it to Venus being conjunct my descendant, but I'm currently living with two Libra risings who are also two of my closest friends. Um, so many of my students now and historically have been Libra risings. This is all to say, um, I have a student right now who is like you, has Libra rising, but is ruled by Venus in Pisces, Venus exalted. And it's been fun to like unpack that particular placement. I'm glad you mentioned that and how
mm,
it's cool to have that Venus exalted Venus as that Libra
mm,
sing. Um, and I think it's a perfect segue too, because we're talking about Pisces, and even though it's technically Sagittarius and Capricorn season in December, there's a lot of mutability this month, meaning the mutable signs Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius, and Virgo, but especially those first three are being really highlighted this month. And Sarah and I went through the calendar of December and we picked out the top 3 transits of this month along with the lunations. And I just want to take us through really quickly what we picked out for this episode, and then we'll get into it. But we'll be covering the full moon in Gemini on December 4th. And our other lunation this month is the new moon in Sagittarius on December 19th. So those are our 2 lunations. And sandwiched in between those lunations are the big 3 transits that Sarah and I picked out. Transit 1, we have Mars squaring Saturn on December 8th. Transit number 2, we have Mercury clearing his retrograde shadow on December 17th. And then transit number 3 is when Chiron will square Jupiter and trine Venus on December 18th. So that's what we have on the docket for this month, and I'm excited to unpack it all. And let's begin in chronological order with the full moon in Gemini, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen. And again, a lot of mutability this month, starting with this full moon in Gemini, of course, opposing the sun in Sagittarius. We also have Venus and Mars in Sagittarius. We have our nodes in Pisces and Virgo. We have Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. So quite a lot of mutability. Sarah, I'm wondering your intuitive feeling or your reaction just to having so much mutability in the sky. Like, what kind of vibe does that create?
I mean, it feels very vague, and I must say, since both Saturn and Neptune are now back in Pisces, there's this interesting phenomenon with 2025, isn't it? The year where we've had, these planets going back and forth between the final degrees of Pisces and into Aries. And now when we end up the year, when we're in the final month of 2025, we have this Piscean return. So I think it's an interesting reminder of, the final part of 2024 and also the beginning of this year. And of course, as we turn into 2026, it's going to be a full-on change. So I think there's, in the storyline and what we are being reminded of, it's I think it's wonderful in a sense that we are now invited back into how we started this year to finalize the last bits before we move into the next chapter. I mean, that's very much relating, of course, to Saturn and Neptune, which will move on when we go into 2026. And regarding the moon, it's also interesting how it's squaring the nodes, right? And it also puts an emphasis on the eclipses that we've experienced in this year. So, I mean, I love how astrology moves also with the calendar years sometimes, or a lot of times, and it gives us it opens up for us to also close our books and kind of remember different parts of our stories within relationships or things that we've gone through in the last couple of months and throughout this year.
Yes. I'm really glad you reminded us, but specifically me, in this moment that, you'd think I'd remember these things because it's my job, but just reminding us that Saturn and Neptune have been back and forth between two signs. Uranus has been back and forth between two signs. Jupiter has been back and forth between two signs. So many, well, he was in Gemini and then moved into Cancer, but regardless, we've had so many outer planets in one sign and then another, and it kind of creates this limbo vibe where we feel, oh, I can kind of see what the next era is going to be, but I'm not quite in it, and I have one foot out the door and one foot inside the old house. And there's a lot of transition, I think, that we've had this year, and just a lot of points where faith has been necessary because we can't quite see what the tangible future is going to become. And right now, our vision could feel very mutable in the sense of it doesn't quite have a form. It's kind of like that butterfly, but in the cocoon, and it's the goo, and it hasn't quite, birthed into something solid yet. So I think there is something about the beginning of this month, specifically this full moon in Gemini. It almost reminds us of all these huge transitions we've gone through, specifically this year, and maybe pulls us a little bit into what we're going into next.
And I mean, that feels also very Gemini in a sense, watching two sides of two different signs, and always almost standing in that doorway, and like weighing both ways, and mercurial also in a sense. Um, um, and I mean, it also shows the difference between the cardinal energy, and here we have the mutable energy. So it also feels like, ending, finalizing, wrapping up, but still that feeling of the unknown. And I always find it really both interesting and also quite annoying that we have the lunations in these signs just coming up to Christmas and holidays, where I mean, here in the northern hemisphere and specifically here in Sweden, the darkness is so dense. I mean, it gets dark here around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So our bodies just want to go into hibernation. We just want to rest, and then we have this energy that just keeps evolving and increasing. And at the same time, we have a lunation in Gemini, which I also always feel has that scatty, all over the place energy, but really also reminding us of the mutable quality, and maybe also the magic of the mutable signs. I really feel that astrology and this moment is like pointing out kind of an homage to both Pisces, Sagittarius, and Gemini with this lunation. It's like yeah, I think an homage, or like, we should celebrate um, the mutable qualities also, that we are able to see both sides, and we are able to do both. It doesn't have to be either or. That's mutability to me.
Totally, totally. And goes with this idea that the mutable signs are double bodied. So they have these like you're saying, these dual aspects to them, and how maybe there's something about this full moon that uh that kind of highlights our inherent dualities as well, and maybe embracing those dualities a little bit more. I've been listening. Weirdly enough, I woke up with this song in my head. I need to look it up. Oh, it's Meredith Brooks' "Bitch," like the song that's like, "I'm a bitch, I'm a lover,
Yeah,
I'm a child, I'm a mother, I'm a sinner, I'm a saint." I was like, "Wait,
love it.
why did I wake up with that in my head?" And I've been listening to it a lot the past week. And I'm like, I think it's because there's so much mutable and there's such a mutable quality about that song, like how we can be all these things at once. So maybe it's sort of the embracing our dualities moon, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. And this kind of leads us into a similar theme when we get to December 8th. uh we'll have Mars beginning to approach that square with Saturn and Pisces, and technically Neptune's in the picture as well. But we're kind of highlighting Mars and Saturn in this square. And specifically, this square highlights Sagittarius and Pisces, and perhaps why these signs are at odds or in tension with each other, which is kind of weird on paper. You're like, well, why wouldn't Sagittarius and Pisces, why wouldn't they get along? Or why do they have tension at times? Because they're both ruled by Jupiter. Shouldn't they have similar qualities? And I think the answer is yes. And the reason they might be at tension with each other is because they have similar qualities in some ways. I think a lot about the archetype between the priest, Sagittarius, versus the mystic, Pisces. Like, what's the difference between being a priest and a mystic? And I think a lot about our relationship to belief. And it's easy to think a belief is the truth. And it's not. It's not necessarily the truth. Just because you believe something does not mean it's um statistically correct or whatever. I mean, I could believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5 and believe it with my whole heart, and doesn't mean it's true. And I mention this because I think there is some tension between belief and truth when we're talking about a square between Sagittarius and Pisces. That's what comes up for me when it comes to these two signs. How do you feel about this one, Sarah?
I love that. Thank you. The priest and the mystic, such a great image of this meeting and the kind of conflict that goes on. What I came to think about is the relationship between a child and a parent, and predominantly the teenager and the parent. So with this energy from Mars in Sagittarius, with, anything is possible and the adventure is just, around the corner, and there's this urge to explore, to learn more by, taking risks and like really pushing to the edge. And then the Saturnian no, and the parental energy of Saturn per se, but then also in some ways in Pisces, being cautious when it comes to the emotional aspects of relationships, or like how to maybe how to find ways of communicating with well, as a parent with your teenager, for instance. There's definitely an interesting square relationship, which I always find. I mean, Saturn is really interesting when you think of um, the 7 and the 14th year, especially when you're 14 going into your teenage years, and that also coinciding with your Saturn opposition. So there's something there where I find that Mars in this picture is kind of showing the complexity of um, facing responsibility and also moving responsibly through and how you mix in your belief system or your fascination of finding out more, or yeah, what you actually think is true to you, or how you open up to new ways of seeing things.
Yeah.
So with the square, especially with these two, always with Mars and Saturn for sure, when they meet in this square, there's this really interesting tension. But maybe because they're now in these two mutable signs, they also act um, as they are from two ages, two generations. Like they see things from two different perspectives, and they find it really hard to find a midway, or to find a balance. They're like, really using their sharp elbows in each other's sides, and they don't really. I mean, they have the same idea. That's why I love squares per se, because it's so fascinating how, they have their same, they see the same goal to some extent, but when you come from two generations, for instance, you have these different experiences that you jump from, or that you jump into a discussion from, or whatever. So um, there's gonna yeah there's gonna be, you will have to find other ways to to find the sweet spot in, where in whatever you are wanting to connect around, I guess.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, like maybe there's kind of a I'm hearing like there's almost like an extremism maybe between Mars, the young teenager wanting to leave home, have an adventure, and then Saturn, the wise grandfather being like, "Are you sure?" or "Did you get your ducks in a row?" or and I think natally, if a client, let's say, had Mars square Saturn natally, the
Mhm.
advice might be um learning, like you said, yeah, to almost temper the temperance card in the tarot, right? Like temper this urge to go really fast with also maybe a competing energy which says don't do it, or like slow down, or you're not ready.
Mhm.
I think there's an equal side of the spectrum, or I'm thinking about what exists on the other side of the spectrum that's opposite
Mm.
to go go go, let's leave home, have an adventure, and that being maybe this Saturn Pisces square.
But I also love the wisdom of Saturn in Pisces. There's not like there's wisdom in the know. It
Mhm.
comes from experience. So I mean, what they share in that they're both mutable, as if they can find ways to tap into each other's language, then I'm sure there will be a way, or with a situation, for instance, if you can find a way to use wisdom, your own wisdom from reason, other experiences, there will be ways to level out the square, or to find a way to go through it, basically.
Totally, totally. And I just remembered too, Sarah, that at the end of November, Saturn stations direct in Pisces. So he's slowly but surely now speeding up, even though he's still, gaining momentum. He hardly has any momentum at this time. Still, I think it's important to note that, yeah, Saturn is out of retrograde now, and I think that maybe helps us a little bit more find that balance between the wisdom of Sagittarius and the wisdom of Pisces, and where we need to sit between those two. Something I also wrote down, because I often find it to be helpful for to kind of relate this to a natal chart. I don't I forget if I mentioned this to you, Sarah, but as I was looking at the month ahead, I found myself thinking about Galileo and how, during the his lifetime, he was the one to kind of speak out against what the Catholic Church had deemed to be the truth, which is, that we have a solar system that revolves around the earth. And Galileo, of course, says no, like it's actually not that. We actually are revolving around the sun. We live in a heliocentric universe. And Galileo got in a lot of trouble for voicing the truth, right? He kind of was that mystic versus the priest, and then spends a lot of his life on house arrest. And I was thinking, this guy must have a lot of mutable, because
Hmm.
his lifetime was kind of about coming up against a belief, or there was some kind of tension between the truth, the belief, different sides of the coin, kind of like what we were saying with the Gemini full moon. And Galileo actually had the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Pluto in Pisces. His sun was square to Uranus and Sagittarius. And then also his sun was square to Neptune in Gemini. So that Pisces sun was in that T square with Uranus and Neptune, which I just find so interesting
Wow.
that uh that is kind of, I don't know, the story of his lifetime, and how maybe it reflects something about the astrological weather currently, especially with our
Mm.
political climate. I mean, I know you're in Sweden, but I'm sure you maybe know a little bit about the stuff that's going on in the US, and it feels
For
relevant to me
sure.
as an American for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go to our next transit for time's sake, which is on December 17th. And we'll all be counting down to this day, because this is the day Mercury will clear his retrograde shadow. At this point, Mercury has gone through quite a bit of a journey. He started his retrograde in Sagittarius. He backed into Scorpio on November 18th. Much of Mercury's retrograde included oppositions to Uranus, which is quite an explosive, maybe vibration. And now, by the time we get to December 17th, he's completed all of those oppositions, and now he's going forward. Yeah, what do you think about this, Sarah, this moment when Mercury clears his retrograde shadow? And also, like, how has the Mercury retrograde been speaking to you, because we are recording very bravely in a Mercury retrograde. So we're technically in the retrograde talking about the future of when he stations direct and out of his shadow. But yeah, tell us a little bit
Mm.
about what you think.
I mean, I must say that I find that the shades of the retrograde, which I think you explained really well, Mallory, oftentimes even more complicated than the actual retrogrades, but especially the shade um, that prefaces the retrograde. And my experience with this now, when we record this, we've only gone through the retrograde through Sagittarius. It will soon go reverse into Scorpio. But I also think it's quite intense when the retrogrades go through two different signs, and when they also stand on both the 0 degree in one sign and then going into the 29th degree in the other sign. For sure, I will feel a relief when the when this shadow when Mercury is like for sure through the shadow. I think it's been a terrible retrograde in terms of technical complications and not so much for me communication as in stuff happening in the everyday ongoing functional life. I've had so many uh, I don't know, mishaps on buses where I've, missed the final stop, and I lost a set of keys. There's just been so many small and truly annoying things in my own life, and from what I experience also with close ones and colleagues, I feel the same. Um, for me, since I also use whole sign house system, it actually happens in my third house. So it makes sense. I mean, Sagittarius is in my third house. So it makes sense that, everything that can go wrong in my near environment, in my where I live and on my route to work, and also, of course, my communication will be turned upside down during a retrograde through the third house. So that was quite on a personal note. But I always feel that there is this release of all the tension when the planet finally goes through the shade and moves on forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I feel I've been noticing maybe more than usual how much this Mercury retrograde has been almost like the stereotype of a Mercury retrograde. Yeah, and I feel like you should direct a play that's called Mercury retrograde or something, and it can be a comedy of all different types of miscommunications. But I think it's interesting that Mercury clears his shadow in Sagittarius, which is the sign opposite to Gemini and opposite to Mercury's domicile. So Sagittarius for Mercury is a place that Mercury doesn't necessarily love to be in. And it's not to say if you have Mercury in Sagittarius, you have a bad set Mercury, but I think there's something here about Mercury having relief, but also still kind of struggling or clawing his way out of maybe a situation that uh wasn't the best for his goals, which are simply to carry messages back and forth. Mercury wants to translate, Mercury wants to communicate, Mercury wants to collect. We can see why he might have trouble doing that in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is so much about maybe seeing the big picture that Mercury's like, wait, what? I just want the information. I don't need all of these beliefs, and I don't need all of these um uh, almost hypothetical um yeah, these hypothetical beliefs. I want facts. So he doesn't quite get his taste for facts yet. Maybe that won't happen until he moves into Capricorn later, probably in January. My math is correct, but I think he's definitely doing better and better the more he progresses in Sagittarius.
And again, the emphasis is on the mutable signs, and we are again in Sagittarius, and Mercury will soon also square Saturn and Neptune on his way towards Capricorn. So I think there's this underlining that keeps coming up in December of all the four mutable signs, but predominantly, of course, both Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini, due to the full moon that we just spoke about. So there's this. It's like astrology and cosmos is really trying to underline or circle some really important points for the collective, and of course also for the individual birth sign. So whatever the viewers have, in the mutable signs, and what houses are there, and if you have personal planets, then that's really also where this underlining and the emphasis is pointing.
Yes, good point. And I think if you're listening and you know your whole house signs of your own natal chart, definitely highlight the Sagittarius house and the Pisces house, because so much will happen this month between those two houses specifically in your chart.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I think transit our last transit besides the new moon gives us a little bit of a break though from the mutables, and we can kind of focus maybe on the two cardinal the cardinal planets right now. On December 18th, Jupiter, who is in retrograde in Cancer, will make a square to Chiron in Aries, which is interesting because this has happened before. This is the second or third coming of this square. But it gives us the opportunity to talk about something that we don't see like every day. It's not the most common transit for Jupiter and Chiron to be in a close square with each other. So this should be kind of interesting. Sarah, what's your take on? I would love to just know your take on Chiron generally, and what does Chiron mean to you as an astrologer?
Hmm. I'm mapping Chiron quite often in readings, and maybe it's got to do with my own age. And I mean, I meet clients in all different ages. I really do. And at the same time, I found in the last couple of years, more and more people heading towards their Chiron return came to me. So Chiron moves. It takes Chiron 50 years, more or less, to move through the zodiac. So just when you're about to turn 50, so between your when you're from 47 up till 50, it differs because Chiron also moves in different speed throughout some of the signs. But when you come up towards your Chiron return, that's also when you really go through that path in life, let's say, and also meeting meeting women and people going through their pre-menopause, it also, of course, coincide with a huge transformation also in the body. So right now, Chiron is in Aries. So I've been meeting a lot of clients having their own Chiron in Aries, and I myself have my Chiron on the third degree of Taurus. So I'm also stepping into 2026 with I don't know what to expect, but I'm definitely moving closer up to my own Chiron return. So that's probably why I find Chiron extra interesting to map, but also the myth of
Mm.
Chiron and the Greek myth of the wounded healer and the life of Chiron and how Chiron as Centaur, but also as teacher, a mentor, and a healer. He turns up in so many of the other myths, especially the heroes myths. So in the story of Achilles and Hercules and there's also I'm so fascinated by the fact that Chiron is part animal, part human, and also part God and human. So with this square, when we were having our pre chats and conversations before our talk, I honed in on this square because I find it really really interesting, both for what you say that it's happened on and off throughout this year, and actually it also coincides with the full moon in Libra that you spoke about in your podcast in April. So the full moon in Libra, the sun was actually on the 23rd degree of Aries, uh, in an exact conjunction with Chiron. So here we have another phenomena with, these transits reminding us of some moments or things that have happened in relationships or situations or emotions or some processes in our own life, but also, of course, in the collective story or in these myths that keep on evolving and happening. And then as I kept thinking of it, I also thought of an album that I've listened a lot to in the recent couple of weeks, which is this album by Lily Allen, the UK singer and musician and writer. So she released this album West End Girl just a few weeks ago, and for me that's also such a great configuration or image of this square between Chiron and Jupiter. Um, so in this album, she writes the whole story of how she was how she she realized that her then husband had been having affairs and her hurt emotions, feelings, and also her need for going through and processing this huge crisis in her life made her write an album that actually was released on the 24th of October, which was last time that Chiron and Jupiter were square in this configuration. Um, so of course, with Chiron, with the wounded healer, with that uh, both the scar but also the wound, and then being in conflict or meeting up with Jupiter, which of course is the planet of exposing and sharing and making wide and spreading, widely and yeah, there's something with that conflict and tension that I found really really interesting. What did you think of it when you when you processed it?
Well, I'll just respond and say that I think the correlation with Lily's album is such a good one. And I even think she's getting at um like the pain of doing being a woman and the pain of doing emotional labor for a mediocre man who like doesn't give you the same um in return. And there's something like cancerian about overgiving, and there's like a martyrism in that. Like, if I give, then I should receive. But sometimes Cancer, especially when Jupiter's in Cancer, I think we can see when have we overgiven, maybe from um a place of insecurity, because sometimes we give because we're trying to earn our spot. We're trying to earn some kind of worthiness to exist. Um, and I think there's something about Jupiter in Cancer that says, well, you're worthy of existence whether you give or not. And I think as Jupiter's meeting this square again with Chiron, yeah, I can see overgiving being a huge maybe theme to come up for people. I also think about sacrifice, and you probably know the myth better than I do, Sarah, but I'm thinking about the end of Chiron's life. He's immortal, so he can't die, but he kind of wants to die because he's in a lot of pain. So he asks Zeus, though, he says, well, I see Prometheus over there suffering as well. Prometheus is being punished, getting his liver plucked out by a griffin every night. Um, Chiron says, I'm suffering anyways. Why don't you let Prometheus out of his punishment and I'll just take Prometheus's place. And then I think
Mm.
Zeus ends up just letting both of them kind of move on past their suffering somehow. But correct me if I don't have the mythology quite correct. But what I'm really getting at is sacrifice, and
Mm.
why we maybe sacrifice ourselves, and sometimes it's for the good of our path, and oftentimes our path does require sacrifice from us. But I'm also thinking about, what if there is a lot of sacrifice that you're making that you don't have to be making, like,
Mm.
or what if you've over sacrificed and lost yourself in the process. And yeah, I could see there being a story with that,
Mm.
some ways. I don't know if that makes any sense, Sarah.
For sure. And also, the knowledge and the fact that Jupiter also is very concerned um with wisdom and like realization. So the fact that Jupiter um um is uh, is retrograding. So the fact that he's actually reversing back to the point and meeting up in that square with Chiron, I feel that there's also what you say with sacrifice, but there's also something that we realize around what we've sacrificed or choices that we've made, or again connecting it to Lily Allen and using art as a way of releasing or understanding or getting to the point of the pain. There's such a beautiful way now I find when Jupiter retrogrades back to that point, it's like it also has that energy or phenomenon of wrapping up or closing the book or finalizing something that has to do with something that you've sacrificed or something that's hurt you. And through art, like through her, for instance, putting the album out, she has also, as an artist, um, shared or enabled us, maybe, or many, like that's how I read a lot of the reviews of the album. So many people relate to what she is writing about. So it's actually also been a way for like hundreds of thousands of women to get back to their story and get that kind of maybe realization or understanding of their own choices, or the bare feeling of just a release of being angry, and being
Yeah.
seen and mirrored in that. And so I find, I also find it so beautiful that this time around, when they meet in this square, we also have Venus there in a trine again from
From
no, yeah, from Sag
to Aries.
to oh yes, sorry, I yeah, to Aries. So we also have this harmony and the feeling of understanding and putting together, and kind of also healing. Like I really feel that there's this opportunity for healing, but without the square, the the wound wouldn't be ready for that healing, or for that nurturing movement that Venus is there to offer. And I it's because I really love the album and I've listened to it so many times, but I find it so um brave and interesting when artists reveal something that is very, very personal, and it could be really difficult and sticky, but she actually does it in a way so that many of us can go back to our own wound and find a way of clearing things out. uh,
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Um
And
that
on the radio today, on our cultural radio channel in Sweden, I also heard that the word or the phenomenon parasocial has become a very popular word, especially in UK. So the idea that you feel close to someone, you feel that you really know a person who you've never met, and the rise of the word in the UK, they've actually connected to Lily Allen and the West End album, because so many people can relate to what she is telling from their own personal wound.
mm, yeah, yeah. That's like it's so funny, the complexities of parasocial relationships. And if you're making content and you're sharing your heart and then people resonate with it, um it's like, oh, it's still kind of like a one-sided interaction, because even though you're sharing yourself, you don't know who's going to receive it, even if it's received well. Maybe there's a little bit of mutability or double bodied in that. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. um
Mm.
yeah, and I think that might be the perfect segue with our final transit we picked out for the month, which is just the next day on December 19th. We have the new moon in Sagittarius. And we've covered 3 days now, 17, 18, and 19. Those 3 days back to back will be quite busy, I think, this month. But we can still consider the Chiron Jupiter square we just discussed still very much active and involved, I think, in this new moon, especially because a new moon in Sagittarius is a new moon ruled by Jupiter. So in a way, this new moon is answering a lot to
Mhm.
this Jupiter Chiron square. Venus is in the mix in Sagittarius. We know at this point Mercury is still in Sagittarius. He's cleared his shadow. One thing I wanted to say about this is this new moon happens at basically 28 degrees Sagittarius, which is the final face or decan of Sagittarius. And the tarot card that is correlated with this decan is the 10 of Wands. Uh,
Mm.
so I kind of like the 10 of Wands as maybe the wisdom with this new moon in Sagittarius. Maybe there are um, certain journeys or paths that have become too hard to sustain, maybe with all of these sacrifices we're thinking about, this week, and that maybe we're thinking, okay, I'm going to actually stop sacrificing myself for this thing, this person, this whatever. It's not actually aligned for me. It's more aligned with my wounds.
Mhm.
Or there could be a burst of energy to continue the fight, continue to drive towards the goal that's a challenging goal, but it's possible nevertheless. I think part of Sagittarius too is about overcoming great odds. I think with the Sagittarius being the Jupiter ruled sign. So those are all of the
Mhm.
themes I think about with a new moon at the very end of
Mm.
Sagittarius. I want to hear what you think, but I also want to hear you as a tarot reader. What do you make of the 10 of Wands? Ooh, yeah, thanks for taking it out.
I just found my 10 of Wands. This is Tarot of the Holy Spectrum from Chase Voorhees. I think it's such a great image of like carrying all these 10 wands. Yeah, thank you for bringing in the decans. I love to work with those, especially with the lunations. It's such a great way of honing in all in another way of storytelling and also using the tarot. I also thought of the fact that the last new moons have all happened in the very last degrees in each sign. So it's like it's a repeating pattern with the new moons happening just before the sun and the moon moves on to the next sign. And again, in the personal horoscope, in the personal birth chart, it also mm, 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 makes a point, because if you have something in your own chart in the final decan in any of the signs basically, or in any mutable cardinal or fixed sign, then you will have that part activated in your chart basically.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good
But
point.
it really feels like we are, repeating ourselves with this mutability. I mean, I don't think I realized until this conversation how much um, um, emphasis was going to be on the mutability as we wrap up and end 2025.
Honestly, yeah, thank God Uranus is back in Taurus for a little bit, because if Uranus if Uranus was in Gemini, then it would almost be like overboard, but still, yeah, I can't. And I'm also circling back to something you said in the beginning, where this is the last moment kind of that we have Saturn and Pisces. And I think part of this new moon because it's in this square with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, it's like this final conversation or this final piece of wisdom that we're getting from both Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, because we won't have another new moon like this once those two move back into Aries, which will be by Valentine's Day 2026. Both of them will be back in Aries, if I'm remembering correctly. So, there's something here where it's like, all right, even though this is new moon in
Mm,
Sagittarius, what has the lesson been with Saturn in
mm,
Pisces? I mean, it's on a personal level, it's my Saturn return. It's like the last moments of my Saturn return in Pisces. So, yeah, for anybody who's around my age, like 20, 28, 29, 30, or I guess if you're having the second Saturn return, that could apply too. But I think it's especially important for the Saturn returners to take a moment to reflect, I think.
mm.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients going through their second Saturn return through Pisces, and I will say it's as intense, but the themes of responsibility tend to revolve around um, more like responsibility of your life path, or also beliefs and spirituality and being a human. So, that's such a great point that you make, in the fact that it is this. I guess you can't call it a celebration because it's a square, but like what is the teaching? What are the lines that were made out, or what did I find throughout this year, and especially, I mean, with the Saturn return for sure, but also other themes that you can find in the houses where you have Saturn and Pisces, where Saturn has moved throughout the last 3 years, and then in the final path of Saturn, it's been this connection also with Neptune, which for sure has been confusing. I mean, the contradiction between what is real and what is fantasy, and how can I know, what my next step will be, and so on. So there's also um, mm, yeah, I think there will be some of the questions that have been following us throughout this year, but also actually ever since the beginning of 2023, through Saturn's journey through Pisces, there's really this moment to see things for what they are, or to maybe realize how you've gained wisdom. It won't be an easy energy since it's a square, and the fact that Saturn is involved in the square with this new moon, so it will be quite sharp realizations, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a celebration, but maybe it's the final test before you graduate. Yeah. So like
Mm.
the celebration's impending, but you have to take the test first if you want your diploma. uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm so glad we got to dive into this, Sarah, and I think it makes sense in retrospect why intuitively I think two Pisces placements needed to talk about such a mutable month. And yeah, it was only us who could really speak to it. And I want to know, of course, I'll have this all in the show notes, but can you just let the listeners know where to find you and how to book with you? And you also do consultations in, let us know the languages you do consultations in as well.
So I work in Swedish and English, and actually just to round up my journey into astrology, after my studies with English speaking teachers, I was missing my Swedish my Swedish astrology language. Um, so I moved from, having read all the books in English into really exploring my way of writing and speaking astrology in my in mother's tongue. So I work in on my Instagram. I am so below store. There I write in Swedish. Um, and I have my website is sobelow.se, and it will soon have an English translation. I definitely see clients in English as well, and I love to write astrology. So, as a follow-up, in all my readings, I also send a short text, like a love language, or an astrological love letter, from me to my clients.
Oh, that's very Venus and Pisces of you. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Sarah, if someone who wants an English consult with you, can they just DM you on Instagram? Is that the way to go since your website's more in Swedish at the moment?
Yes, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay, good
Just
to
connect via Instagram or email me. There's all the information on my website, and there will be an English page on there to find me as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for wrapping up 2025 with me. I can't believe we've wrapped it up, but it was perfect, and I hope to have you back on the channel sometime in the future too.
Would love to.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah.